peeps! So we are going to start off this week talking about genres. Genre is literature or writing that's defined by characteristics. In order for you to be able to pick a just right book, you're going to have to understand what genres you even like. Whenever you took your beginning of the year reading interest inventory, or that survey that told me what books you liked and didn't like, you told me a lot about the genres that you were interested in. In our virtual class, the genre of interest that appeases most people in our class are graphic novels, which I think is really cool. It means that you guys like pictures with your writing, which I do too, so that's pretty cool. So let's get started, and we're going to talk about genres a lot this week, so make sure that you're taking note. You might have a pop quiz on Friday. So most books fit into two categories. They're either nonfiction or fiction. So the way I remember fiction and nonfiction is, so whenever I'm talking about fiction, fiction means that it's fake or it didn't happen. So fiction is fake. Nonfiction is not fake. So not fake and fake. So things that are not fake would be like your science textbook or your iReady book, or whenever you read passages about weathering and erosion. Those are nonfiction. Whenever you read stories that happen in real life, like news articles, those are nonfiction. Fiction would be things that aren't really happening. So our book Holes that we're reading for our read aloud, that would be fiction. Okay, so nonfiction, a book that contains true facts about a topic. And fiction is a book that is not real. So an author devised or made up the story. So if we take a closer look at nonfiction, it includes three main genres. These are the main three that are going to help you navigate the library a little bit better and are going to help you understand later whenever we start writing informational pieces of writing, like reports and essays and things like that. It's going to help you with the text structure of that. So we have informational, we have autobiography, and we have biography. For informational, it's a text that provides true facts about a topic. It often contains diagrams, charts, and photographs with captions. So those things are text features. And over here, a text that provides true facts about a topic, that would be, like I said earlier, with your iReady book or with your science textbook, or if you have a social studies textbook that you've used before, all of those things would apply. A biography is a story of a real person's life, and it's written by another person. So biography would be like the Who Was books, like that series that talks about like who was Elvis, who was Thomas Jefferson. Those are all biographies. Another example of a biography is here, The Story of Ruby Bridges by Robert Coles. An autobiography, so auto is a prefix that means self. So it's a self-biography, a story of a real person's life. It's written by that person. So the author is the person the story is about. So the last example I gave you for the biography, somebody wrote about Ruby Bridges. Now Ruby Bridges is writing about herself in a story that she wrote called Through My Eyes. Now let's take a closer look at fiction. It includes many genres. Many, many, many. We have mystery, we have realistic fiction, we have fantasy, we have science fiction, and a lot more. The book Holes that we're reading, it actually falls under realistic fiction and fantasy. So we see the realistic fiction components of it right here. We see that whenever we talk about Stanley's life and about his time at the camp. We get the fantasy parts of it whenever we talk about Madame Zeroni and taking the pig up the mountain and curses and things like that. So another example of realistic fiction is Because of Winn-Dixie, which a lot of people have read already. If you haven't, it's a really good book. It's kind of sad, forewarning. But it's a story that uses fictional characters and is set in the present time. The events in the book did not happen, but they really could happen, kind of like Holes. Science fiction, if you've ever read The Hunger Games, that's by Suzanne Collins. That book is kind of brutal, but it's pretty good. If your parents let you read it, you should read it. Science fiction is a story that uses fictional characters and is often set in the future and uses elements of science and technology. One of the things I think of even before Hunger Games is Star Wars and the comic books. Those are very much science fiction. If you've ever read Ender's Game, you might read that in high school or middle school. Really good book. That is science fiction. Anything like that would be science fiction. Historical fiction, Sarah Plain and Tall. There's other examples too. We're going to read a couple of historical fiction books this year that I'm not going to tell you the titles of because I know some people will go ahead and read them. But Sarah Plain and Tall is historical fiction, and it's a story that takes place in the past during a specific time period. So those would be stories that happen during a major event, like maybe the Holocaust or World War II or World War I or the Civil War. That would be historical fiction whenever it takes place during a very specific historical time period. And the setting of the story is real, but the characters are made up. Mystery is a story about a puzzling event that is usually not solved until the end of the story. It's usually suspenseful, and the characters uncover clues throughout the story. So Who Stole the Wizard of Oz by Avi. Other examples of mystery would be The Boxcar Children, would be Nancy Drew. If you have like a Scooby-Doo book at home, that would be mystery. You could even qualify Harry Potter as a mystery. Harry Potter could also be fantasy, kind of like how Holes has two genres. Harry Potter could have two genres. So a story that includes events that could never happen in real life. It may include characters that could not really exist and may include magic. So if your story has like unicorns in it, or a magic wand, or fairies, or things like that, that would be fantasy. Poetry is verse written to create a response of thought and emotion in the reader, and it often uses rhyme and rhythm, but it doesn't have to include those elements. One really good example of poetry in music is rap. Rap is poetry. Song lyrics, if they rhyme, are poetry. Song lyrics, if they don't rhyme, could be poetry. Poetry is anything that is a little bit more dramatic than what you would read normally. Another example of poetry could be Dr. Seuss. The example you see here is Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein. Okay, another thing for fiction. Folk tales, also known as traditional literature, are fiction as well, and they are stories from long ago. So they could be myths and legends, fairy tales. Disney movies can fall in this category. Like with Snow White and Seven Dwarfs, Rapunzel, that would be a fairy tale. Tall tales, fables, Jack and the Beanstalk, Little Red Riding Hood, those are folk tales. They're stories that originated with a group of people long ago who passed the story down orally from generation to generation, and folk tales are often considered to be false or based on superstition. Superstition is whenever you are nervous about something because somebody says you should be. So if you've ever heard of Friday the 13th is superstitious because it's unlucky, or maybe walking under a ladder is unlucky, those are superstitions. Cinderella is a good example of a fairy tale. It's a type of folk tale that has magical forces and events. It usually ends happily, and the characters often include royalty, elves, dragons, and fairies. Now, fairy tale sounds really similar to fantasy. They could be coexisting genres if you wanted to be technical about it, but those types of stories are specifically a fairy tale. Tall tales are a type of folk tale that has been greatly exaggerated. So Paul Bunyan is a lumberjack, and he does a lot of crazy stuff. It probably started out, it includes a larger-than-life character who accomplishes the impossible. So Paul Bunyan is a lumberjack, and he accomplishes a lot of impossible things. A myth is a folktale that attempts to explain how something in the world came to be, and the characters often include gods and goddesses. So Zeus, king of the gods. You could even qualify Percy Jackson as a myth because it has some of those elements in there. Percy Jackson would also be a combination of fantasy and realistic fiction. Okay, a fable is a type of folktale that is a short story that teaches a lesson. Characters are often talking animals. So we have the Lion and the Mouse. If you've ever read that story about King Midas and everything he touches turns to gold, that would be a fable. A legend is a type of folktale that is based on a real person and real events, but it cannot be proven to be true. The people from whom the story began often believe that it really did happen. Okay, so let's review. I want you to name the genre. Jasmine is reading a book that is set during the time of the Revolutionary War. It contains characters and a plot. That would be historical fiction. The one way that we know is historical fiction. Remember, historical fiction takes place in a time period. So Revolutionary War is my key point there. It contains characters and a plot. So do most stories, but the key term is that it's Revolutionary War. That tells you that it's historical fiction. Okay, keywords, we already identified those. Boom. Okay, let's name the genre again. This time I'm going to let you think of it on your own for a little while. So James is reading a book that is full of facts about the Titanic, and it contains diagrams and photographs. That would be informational. Now, I want you to think for a minute and think about those key words that would help you identify the genre. If you said diagram, facts, or photographs, so diagrams, photographs, and facts, those are some key words that help you determine that it's informational. Okay, this other one, I'm going to wait a little longer and let you see if you can identify the genre without me putting it up there first. So Libby is reading a suspenseful book that contains clues about who robbed a bank. She's trying to solve the crime before the characters in the book solve it. So, what genre do you think that is? If you said mystery, awesome job. Proud of you. Now, what were some of the keywords? If you said suspenseful, clues, and solve crime, so suspenseful, clues, and solving and crime, then you're correct. Okay, last one. Tyler is reading a book about kids who attend a secret school where they are learning how to use their superhero powers. What genre do you think that is? If you said fantasy, awesome. What are those keywords that tell you it's fantasy? If you said superhero powers, give yourself a pat on the back. All right. I'm going to give you a few to practice on your own today in your little quiz. Feel free to use this PowerPoint to help you throughout your quiz.